All right, training tip for the day. What I find with a lot of athletes is that they tend to train in one plane of motion and one plane only. And I want to emphasize how important it is to work in all three planes of motion. So the main one that most people work in or spend a lot of time in is the sagittal plane, which would be your squats, your deadlift, anything that's hinging in that forward movement. But it's important that we make sure that we train in all different planes of motion because things like sprinting require movement in all types of change of motion. And your sports especially require change of direction in all three planes of motion. So we have the sagittal plane, which would be forward and back, squats, deadlifts, all that type of stuff. And then we have our frontal plane, which is any sort of sideways movements that we're dealing with, so pushing off that leg and moving sideways. And then we have the transverse plane of motion, which is where we're talking about any sort of rotational stuff along that transverse axis. So when we get our guys training, we want to make sure that we're doing work in all three planes of motion. But one that we find that's really neglected, but is extremely important when we're talking about sprinting and creating force into movement, is rotational. And a lot of baseball and rotational sports, you'll see work a ton of med ball type of exercises into their training, but we can do that with every sport. So I'm just going to show you one quick exercise we like to do, but in reality, you guys can do any type of rotational exercise. Just make sure that you're implementing it into your training program. So we like to use some med ball work. You can do this in a staggered stance, or you can do it in a traditional stance, but we want to work rotation. So as we go here, we're going to load the scoop toss into our hip, drive through to the wall, and catch the ball. We're trying to get as much force as possible into rotation. So we're loaded, hip drive into the wall. We're doing it normal, same thing. Loaded on the balls of our feet, load into the pocket, drive out.